Welcome to everyone to our 30 minutes on the Parsha with our friend for the year, Don Isaac Abravanel. And tonight we're going to look at Parshas Acharei-Kedoshim. Actually, what we're going to look at is from Acharei, although it is a double header this year. Our subject is Get Your Goat. And I would like to explore together some fascinating and original approaches to the phenomenon of the goats that were a feature, an essential, a characteristic feature of the avoda of the divine service in the temple, and before that in the Mishkan on Yom Kippur. And although this is not part of contemporary Jewish experience and has not been for a long, long time, however, it is featured very prominently and extensively in the Yom Kippur liturgy, and it occupies an important place, certainly in the Torah and particularly in our Parsha. So that's what I'd like to look at. If you're with me in the art scroll, you can find the passage that concerns us on page 638. It's near the beginning of our Sedra of Acharei, which deals the first part of it entirely with the avoda on Yom Kippur, the special service, particularly as conducted by the Kohen Gadol. So on page 638, the Torah says in Pasuk Zayin, 638 in the art scroll, whatever Chumash you're using, it's chapter 16, verse 7. V'lakach es shnei hasirim v'hemid osam lifnei Hashem Pesach Ohel Moed. Aharon will take the two se'irim, a se'ir is a goat, the two goats, and he places them lifnei Hashem Pesach Ohel Moed, before God at the entrance to the tent of appointed meeting. That is the Mishkan, or later on in the Beis Hamikdash. And the Torah describes in some detail, Nasan Aharon al shnei asirim goralos. He should place a goral as a lot, like a lottery, on the head of each of the goats. Goral echad laHashem, goral echad la'Azazel. One lot, which means it's destined for God, and the other ones, which means it's destined for Azazel. Azazel is variously interpreted, but it clearly is an alternative, maybe a polar opposite alternative to the offering to Hashem. I'll just tell you that in modern Hebrew, colloquial Hebrew, Azazel is like purgatory. If a person were to say to an adversary, Lech Azazel, he's saying, get lost. I'm putting it in slightly more euphemistic language. And the Torah goes on to describe more about this avoda. Actually, I want to even look before that, however, a couple of verses earlier, where it says, Bezos Yavo Aharon El HaKodesh. I'm sorry, Pasuk Hey, in verse 5, Me'es Adas B'nei Israel, that's where we need to begin tonight, really. U'me'es Adas B'nei Israel Yikach Shnei Seirei Izim Lechatas. From the congregation, on behalf of the congregation of the children of Israel, he shall take two goats, lechatas, as a sin offering, v'ayel echad la'olah, and a single ayel, a ram, for an all burnt offering. Now this is prior to, that is to say, distinct from the two goats that were, one of them was the scapegoat. By the way, that's the origin of the term scapegoat, and the other one is offered in the Mishkan. But prior to that, and separate from that, the Torah specifies that Aharon should also take from the children of Israel two goats. Actually, I'm wondering, they may not be separate from that. I stand corrected. They are the two goats which are called a chata. So that's the context. Abarbanel says that, there's a well-known explanation or symbolism of the purpose of this goat. Why was there a need for a goat as a sin offering on Yom Kippur? Why is the goat in particular the chosen animal that is designated for the purpose of the sin offering, which is a form of expiation of sin, on Yom Kippur, the most important, the most solemn day of the year? So Rashi says, I'm sorry, I don't know if it's from Rashi. Chazal say that the reason for the selection of a goat is to recall that which it says in the book of Bereshis, Veishchetu Seir Izim, that they slaughtered a goat. They, meaning the brothers of Joseph, who sold him into slavery, only having just barely enabled him to escape certain death. they then had a problem. What do we tell our dad? So they had stripped him of his distinctive multicolored dream coat, and they ran it through with the sword a few times, and they dipped it in the blood of a goat which they slaughtered. So Rashi said, Chazal, I don't know if it's in Rashi, Chazal say that it was in order to, that they did it to deceive their father, and the gravity of that transgression, of that act of treachery, in which they turned on their own brother, so to speak, reverberated throughout history and necessitated or corresponding to it was this sin offering on Yom Kippur year by year. The Rambam gives another explanation. The Rambam says that the seir, the goat, is a symbol of idolatry. And the word seir, which means a goat, also means like a demon. Useirim yirakdu sham. The word seir is also used because goats prance around, maybe for other reasons, which we'll get to shortly. They are associated with demons, and the Torah recognizes or is sensitive to the seir symbolizing demonology, the occult, various forms of paganism and heathen worship, and therefore to confront the temptation and in some cases the failure of the Jewish people vis-a-vis the lure of idolatry. So on Yom Kippur, they would sacrifice as a sin offering the goat. Says our friend for the Abarbanel, these explanations are not convincing. He says these things happened a long time ago. And it doesn't explain why the Jewish people, year by year, in the days of Aharon himself, later on in the days of the Beis Hamikdash in the first temple, when they still had some confronted the lure of idolatry, and even in the second temple, hundreds and hundreds of years later, thousands of years altogether, he says it's not convincing that they still do this ritual because of what was in early antiquity. Now, one could question that. We do find many practices and many aspects of Jewish observance which evoke or are a like continual, an eternal reminder of ancient events. We do find that, but Abarbanel has something else up his sleeve. He's got something else that he would like to suggest, which I find fascinating, and I'm excited to share it with you. He says that, just to read you a few words of his criticism, how is it that the Jewish people should still seek thousands of years later atonement and expiation for something that happened in early biblical times, Yosef, the sale of Joseph, or worshiping demons? He said Jews have a lot of problems, but worshiping demons is not something which is a contemporary crisis in Jewish life, contemporary in his days, and even in earlier times as well. It goes back to ancient Egypt. The Rambam actually says that that was a habit of the ancient Egyptians, and the Jews were influenced by the Egyptians. Sure, they were at the time that the Torah was given, and the time when Aharon himself lived, and the time that the Jews were in the wilderness, yes, indeed. But that doesn't explain why the Torah should say Chukal Solam. It's a permanent, eternal, everlasting chuk. Says Abarbanel, let me tell you what I think. Ha'emes sheseir hachata shaya ba'im hamusafim haya lechaper al hayetza hara hamevi ha'adam lachet. The Seirizim was to atone for the evil inclination which prompts or lures a man or a woman to sin. He says, he doesn't actually spell it out here, he spells it out a little bit later, but of course what he's referring to is the similarity in the sound. Seir is with a sin. Tsair means youth. Sa'ir with an ayin is like sa'ir with a sin. They sound the same. He says that the Torah prescribes using a se'irizim because it alludes to the tseir, to the tseir meaning youthfulness. What's wrong with youthfulness? Well, there's impetuosity of youth, but there's something worse than impetuosity, and that is the immaturity of youth. Every person is born at a young age. Every person is, uh, as we'll talk about in one moment, subject to the, let's say, errors or the ignorance or the power of the Yetzer Hara in youth. But the problem is that how often do we remain enthralled to those youthful immaturities? How often do we and can one, if he's honest, even trace his own foibles and his own failings to habits or not necessarily habits acquired, but worse than habits acquired in one's youth, but behavior which is immature, which is reflective of youth. What do I mean? So Abarbanel says that the Yetzer Hara is in a person's character from his earliest infancy. And Chazal say that a person acquires a Yetzer Tov at age 13, but he acquires a girl at age 12. But the Yetzer Hara is Rami Nu'urav, as the Torah says in Parashas Bereshis. The Yetzer Machshavos Libo Rak Kol Hayom. That a person's the nature of the human condition is Lepetach Chatat Rovetz, that the sin crouches at the opening. Rashi says it means from the time that the child, the infant, even agitates to emerge into the world, agitates as a fetus in his mother's womb, the Yetzer Hara is already part of him. The Yetzer Hara is already within him. Mishashin in Ireland says the Pesach Hatas Rovetz means from the opening of the womb, that sin or the danger of sin or the lure of sin is part of the human condition from earliest infancy. In psychological terms, Freud taught that, and I think here Abarbanel anticipates Freud, that sin is through immaturity. Freud taught that an infant is completely self-centered. Uh, that's because a newborn cannot conceive or value or appreciate a world beyond his own immediate needs. And without needlessly belaboring the point, it takes time before an infant and then a toddler and then a young child can begin to think outside of itself, can begin to recognize the needs of others, the world of others. And of course, some people never get beyond that. Some people are always focused and only on the here and now, on the egocentricity, on the self-centeredness, on my needs. I may struggle to compromise or set aside, or maybe even to abandon what I want because of reasons of morality, because reasons of decency, because reasons of philanthropy, because reasons of loyalty, even for reasons of commitment. A person might be committed contractually to something, but when that contractual commitment is confronts his self-interest, many people find it difficult to put aside their self-interest. That is a sign, psychologically, we would say, of immaturity, and it's not limited to a young child at all. And Abarbanel says that represents the impulse, the drive of the Yetzer Hara. It's not that far from what Freud called the id. And with this, we can see something else. Abarbanel does not mention this, but I think he has this in mind. And that is the title of our little shir tonight is called Get Your Goat. Now, the goat in iconography and in medieval imagery and art is often a symbol of the demon or the devil. Not in Jewish thought necessarily, but we do find in the Torah, I told you, the pasuk, Usi'irim Yirakdu Sham, that the seir is associated with the demon. It's not the devil or the Satan in the Jewish sense, but it may be a derivative of it. It may be a corruption of that. And I think that's what Abarbanel is getting at here. And I think that the expression "get your goat," we don't often deal with etymology and that sort of thing in this year, not the English type, sometimes the Hebrew. But I was trying to think of what to call this year tonight, something a bit snappy, a little bit provocative. So I came up with the title Get Your Goat. And I did a bit of research, as one can do with a few keystrokes nowadays. Where's the derivation of that expression, get your goat? Can I tell you, the internet has no idea. They have the most superficial, hollow, unconvincing suggestions. I don't want to tell you what they are. There's nothing lewd about the suggestions that I saw. They're just completely unconvincing, completely. I think the origin of the expression "get your goat," it means to goad someone or to vex someone. To irritate him intensely. Get your goat. When I say that music really gets my goat, or this new coworker gets my goat, what I mean is, I don't use that expression, by the way, but one who does use that expression, the meaning is brings out the worst in me, brings out the devil in me. That's the meaning. Get your goat is because the goat is a symbol in medieval Christian iconography and early pagan imagery as well, is associated with the devil and associated with in our terms, with the Yetzer Hara. Says Abarbanel, that's why the Torah says on Yom Kippur, Se'irizim lechatas, a sin offering, because we are seeking atonement. We are recognizing, we are acknowledging that so much of human transgression is because of immaturity. Immaturity meaning the self-centeredness, the egocentricity of early infancy and childhood, which so many people, perhaps most of us in various ways, struggle to outgrow. It's the cause of the Yetzer Hara, the cause of Chet. That's the first thing I wanted to share with you tonight. I think it's novel. I like the suggestion. Abarbanel, as I always say, does not need my endorsement. Maybe it needs your endorsement. I hope you found it of interest. But let me share with you what he says about this most uh, like intriguing, perplexing, um, I suppose, odd ritual, certainly unique in our tradition that we don't find it anywhere else. Sir echad laHashem, sir echad la'Azazel. One to God and one to purgatory, or something similar the Torah describes in the verses that follow. You can take a look for yourselves. Just look at the text of the Chumash. I'll just read you a few words. Why should I send you on your own? I'll tell you. The seir that was sent to Azazel, Yamar Chai lifnei Hashem lechaper alav, leshalach oso la'Azazel, to send him to the into the wilderness, into a desolate place, to essentially push it to its death off a cliff, Hamidbara, in the wilderness. The one, the chatas that is designated for the for Hashem, so he offers that as a sacrifice. And then it says that there is a designation of ish iti, which I can't even find that expression at the moment, where the goat that is sent to the wilderness is placed under the care of someone who's been designated for that purpose, a person who's designated for the purpose of taking that goat to a distant place, essentially pushing it off the cliff, and it probably perishes, although goats are actually pretty resourceful, so maybe they won't entirely perish. The Mishnah seems to assume that he will. In the time we have left, let me tell you what Abarbanel suggests about these Shnei Seirim. So he has two theories that he advances. The first, he says, is that I think they symbolize Esav and Yaakov. Seir Azazel, Shu Hasur Hashishim Avoros Shel Zehayom, Dati Hu Shahayu Shnei Asirim Haim Remez LeEsav VeYaakov. These two goats symbolize those two brothers, Esav and Yaakov, because they were brothers, the sons of the same mother, the sons of the same father. In fact, they were twins, as we know. They were born one after the other. In fact, almost nearly simultaneously, according to the account of the Torah, very well known, that Yaakov came out holding the heel of Esav. And what Abarbanel is alluding to here is the fact that the Talmud establishes in a lot of detail that these two goats have to be the same value, the same height, the same color. They have to be effectively uh, uh, interchangeable, almost without any way of recognizing one over the other. The same height, the same size. They don't have to be from the same flock necessarily, but they have to be essentially indistinguishable from one. I mean, meaning they're identical. So it says Abarbanel, the symbolism here is for Yaakov and for Esau. And even though they are the same, meaning they're the same height, etc., but the word seir hints to the word sair, meaning youthfulness. Now, we already heard from Abarbanel in a whole short essay that we've shared already. But he says that Yaakov is Tza'ir, even though they were twins, but Yaakov is identified as the younger brother, as we very well know. So therefore he says these two Seirim, even though they're identical in every way, but the word Seir itself alludes to the fact that one of them is younger because that's Yaakov who is the younger one. And then it goes on to say the idea of Goral is that the two of them are indistinguishable, and nevertheless, the fate of one of them is to be an offering to God. The fate of the other is to be sent into the forces of desolation. By the way, Ramban has an approach which Abarbanel also quotes, doesn't really go with Ramban's thoughts about this. But let's explore how Abarbanel explains it. So he says that the one which corresponds to Yaakov, of course, is the one who is going to be the servant of God. Nichnas damo lekodesh hakadashim heichal Hashem. The blood of that goat will be brought into the holy of holies. Sheyaakov shenifrad letumo kirvas elokim. It's actually not the holy of holies, but in the holy part of the Mishkan, and that corresponds to Yaakov, whose destiny was to be the chosen one of God, and Esav was rejected, or Esav rejected himself, perhaps. Lo Kiras Elohim lo tov, because Yaakov chose the proximity to Hashem, hu v'zaro zochim l'olam haba, and he and his descendants are destined for the world to come. And that's a metaphor for being like ushered into the inner sanctum of the Beis Hamikdash, in a metaphorical way, the soul of those righteous who live on in the next world. He says the sages also hint to this because it says in the pasuk avonosam, their sins. So Chazal interpreted to mean avonos tam, the sins of the one who is tam. What does tam mean? We had him in the Seder. One of the sons, the four sons, is the tam. But of course, it derives from Yaakov Ish Tam, Yoshev Alim. He's perfect. Meaning he's the one, maybe he's perfect. He's maybe like the introspective one. He's the intellectual, spiritual personality. That's Yaakov Ish Tam, contrasted, of course, with Esav. So he says that Esav is like distanced. Esav is sort of given his portion in a foreign land. He doesn't even say it, but Esav is called Seir. And when Yaakov was encouraged by his mother to impersonate Esav, so Esav, to get the blessings from his father, Yaakov right away said, "Yeah, but my skin is smooth. My brother is hairy." So she said, "Don't worry, I've got a plan. Take the skin of a goat, and then you'll impersonate your brother." So Esav is Seirot. He's hairy. He's like a goat. Okay, not really, I mean, to the full extent, but something along those lines. So we find the idea that Yaakov and Esav are both it is natural, or at least in the realm of interpretation or symbolism, we can associate these two Sirim with Yaakov and Esav respectively. And he says that the word lechaper alav, that it's for the purpose of atonement. He says that the kapara can also mean like the vidui, the acknowledgement of wrongdoing, which is the first step towards atonement. So therefore, Aharon, the Kohen Gadol, will like confess the sins of his own sins, those of his household, those of the Jewish people, upon this seir, this goat, and that will be a means of kapara, a means of atonement. Again, Abarbanel doesn't say it, but I think he's alluding to the ritual that we are familiar with until current era of what we call kaparos on Erev Yom Kippur, where we take a chicken and we say, Zeha tarnigol yelech lemisa. This tarnigol will go to its death, and I will be ushered into the blessing and life in the year ahead. So, in a similar way, the goat that is sent to its death symbolizes the punishment that is sort of in place of the punishment that would be due and destined for the person who has sinned because he's confessed his sins. He's undertaken to become a better person. So, in terms of the symbolism, Abravanel says this is Yaakov and Esav. But then he says, I've got a better idea. More correct in my eyes regarding this is a different idea altogether. Both of the Sirim represent the Jewish people, b'chalusam collectively, but in completely different ways, in opposite ways. Because there are those who are upright, who are honest, who are God-fearing, who are devout, who are ethical, who are, again, I'm sort of describing a paradigm, who are exemplary in their behavior. Those are the ones who are symbolically chosen to be ushered into the Ohel Moed. Then are those who are wicked, those who are iniquitous. Metaphorically, the two goats represent the best and the worst of the Jewish people. That's why it says, "Ume'es adas b'nei Israel." And from within the congregation of Israel, the Torah doesn't have to say that. It would be implied. Where else does Aharon get these goats from? He can't order them on Amazon. He takes them or he acquires them. That is to say, they are provided from the communal funds of the Jewish people. But the Eis Ben Israel, Abravanel says, it alludes to the fact that they symbolize those members of the Jewish people, the best and the worst. He says the word goral can be used also, the word goral, which means a lottery, a lot as in a lottery, can also be used for reward, whether for good or for better. So a person's goral, like it says a pasuk in Daniel, perhaps you're familiar with it, V'ata lech leketz, the end of the book of Daniel. Take a look in chapter 12, the end of book of Daniel. So Hashem says to Daniel, V'ata lech leketz, now you go till the end of days. V'tanuach, and you shall recline. It means you shall repose in the grave. V'ta'amod legoralcha leketz hayamin, and you will arise to your reward at the end of days. So the word goral is used there and elsewhere, indicating the reward, but whether for good or for better. Omnam im hayu bnei Yisrael ra'im v'chataim laHashem. But if the Jewish people were wicked, were undeserving, were unworthy, then it is their destiny to face the bitter, painful experience of being banished la'azazel. He says that refers to a nation that is that is powerful. Azel means to go towards those who are stern, who are probably not just stern. Means cruel, and says Abravanel again. I'm sure reflecting contemporary experiences. You know, he was among those Gugurashe Svara, untender mercies of a fierce and hostile nation. Will be banished, will be driven from its land, lios am azpanim, to be instead in the company of a fierce and hateful, vindictive, brutal nation. I'm slightly elaborating. V'ya'on shebalam hazeh, and their punishment will be in this world. V'yischu min haaretz, they will be driven or shaken out from their land, and they will be driven to a distant place. So those are like the two possibilities, the two perhaps extremes that are represented. Says Abarbanel, and just in the minutes we have left, which we don't have much time, he gives a few reasons why he finds this explanation more compelling. First, it says, the implication is that these goats come from within the Jewish people, symbolizing metaphorically the two types of Jews, the best and the worst. Secondly, it says that he shall place them before Hashem, these two goats before Hashem, Pesach Oel Moed. He says the implication is, the symbolism is, a person who is standing at the gate of the Beis Medrash, let's say, he can walk right in, but he may choose to walk away. He has the opportunity. He is given the chance to grow, to achieve, to seek that closeness to Hashem. He's Pesach Ohel Moed. He's at the entrance of the Mishkan. But whether he chooses to enter or run the other way, that's up to him. Those are two options, two extremes. It's like Re'ei Anochi nosin liftechem hayom bracha uklala. He says a third reason is that it says that Aaron will take the goat upon which it was designated the Lot Lashem. He says that this alludes to the Jewish people who, if they are worthy, will be in the company of God in the land of Israel. But if they are unworthy, the other goat, the scapegoat, Ozel is to go, to walk, or to proceed, to galus, to exile. So again, there's the symbolism of the land of Israel is the ones who are close to Hashem, and the ones who turn their backs on God will be driven into a lengthy and bitter exile. He mentions perhaps just one last one basis, and yes, he says this: "V'shilach b'yad ish iti hamidbara." He will be placed. The Kohen Gadol will place the goat, the one that's destined for the wilderness, into the hands of ish iti hamidbara. Ish iti. It's an unusual word. It comes from the word ace. Meaning time. Not eight with an ayin, with a tet, which is a pen, but rather ayin taf, which means time, like lakol zman ve'es. The word ish iti, the expression ish iti, like a timely man. What does it mean? So from the context, it means a person whose time has come, a person who is there because he has a particular important role to play at a particular time. But it's interesting that the Torah takes the trouble or chooses to identify him in that way. Says Abarbanel, the remez is to a man, a historical figure, a biblical figure, who was designated, chosen by Hashem, whose star rose to great prominence because he was chosen by Hashem to exile the Jewish people. Says Abarbanel, Ish gadol hama'ala bizmano v'ito, a person who achieved great prominence, great influence, great power, great prestige, an imperialist power of antiquity. Nebuchadnezzar melech Bavel. This refers to Nebuchadnezzar, who was the king of Bavel, through whom the Jewish people were punished, and he was the mechanism, he was the medium through which Hashem punished the Jewish people and drove them into exile. Says Abarbanel, therefore, for these several reasons, he says, I prefer my second interpretation. So the first interpretation was that the two goats represent Esav and Yaakov, and he supports that, I think, quite convincingly. But his heart is with the second option, that they represent the best and the worst of the Jewish people. and they represent the two possibilities. And on Yom Kippur, this is a something that we can all contemplate. I would venture to say that most Jews are somewhere in between those two extremes. But of course, we recognize always that the options, the choices are before us. How shall we progress? What are our aspirations, and in what way will we undertake this Yom Kippur and in the future to be the best people that we can be? So I've gone over by a few minutes, for which I apologize. But Abarbanel, as I have found consistently, has, besides a lot to say, beautiful, inspiring ideas. And I hope that you've enjoyed our short presentation tonight. And I wish everybody a wonderful Shabbos.